There's a certain kind of quiet that settles over a house when you're the only one there. A quiet I used to think was peaceful. It was a comfortable silence, filled with the familiar hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of the old clock in the hall, and the occasional groan of the house settling. It was the sound of home. But after what happened in my last few years living there, I know that some silence isn't peaceful at all. Some silence is just a vacuum, waiting for something else to fill it. Some quiet is just waiting to be broken. It never showed up with a big, terrifying spectacle. There was no ghostly warning, no sudden monster in the shadows. It was patient. It was subtle. It waited until I was alone. The activity always started small, so small you could easily convince yourself it was all in your head. A misplaced set of keys, a quiet thump from an empty room upstairs. The kind of thing your rational mind just brushes off. But the thing is, those little moments keep happening. They add up. And eventually, you have to admit that something is wrong. This was an infestation of the quiet, a twisting of the silence I used to love. And on one particularly long, dark night, it decided it was done being subtle. It was ready to show me what it could really do, not by revealing its own face, but by borrowing one I trusted more than any other. My childhood home was a 2-story colonial, a buttery yellow with white trim. It was the kind of house that belonged on a postcard, surrounded by old oak and maple trees. That house held my entire life within its walls. Every scuff on the floor, every pencil mark on the doorframe tracking my height, every worn spot on my dad's favorite armchair told a story. It was my sanctuary, the one place I was supposed to feel completely safe. I knew its language, too, a vocabulary of creaks and groans I'd learned over 16 years. I knew the sigh the pipes made, the rattle of my bedroom window when the wind blew just right, the pop of the floorboards in the hall at night. Those were the normal sounds. The sounds that meant everything was okay. My parents were creatures of habit. My mom was a teacher with a perfectly timed routine, and my dad, an engineer, was just as predictable. He had a specific way he came into the house after work. I could be upstairs with headphones on and still know he was home. First, the jingle of his keys. Then, the solid thud as he dropped them into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. A heavy sigh would follow, releasing the stress of the day. And finally, his footsteps. My dad walked with a purpose, a heavy, solid tread. He had a barely noticeable limp from an old college knee injury, which gave his walk a unique rhythm on our wooden stairs. It was a familiar, comforting sound, a solid step with his right foot, followed by a slightly softer, almost dragging step with his left. Thump. Drag. Thump. Drag. It was the sound of safety. The sound of Dad being home. The weird stuff started so gradually I can't even pinpoint the exact day. It was more like a slow creeping wrongness. The first time, it was my house keys. I had a hook just inside the kitchen door where I hung them every single day, without fail. One afternoon, I came home from school and went to grab a snack. An hour later, I was about to leave, and the keys were gone. I checked the hook 3 times. I emptied my entire backpack on the floor. I checked my pockets, the counters, the table, nothing. I was getting frustrated, starting to think I was losing my mind, when I finally spotted them. They were sitting neatly on the mantelpiece in the living room. A place I never put them. I just stared, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I knew I hadn't put them there. The only other explanation was that I was so forgetful I had no memory of doing it. I chose to believe that. It was just easier. A week or so later, I was home alone again, trying to push through some history homework. The house was dead quiet. My parents were at a dinner party and wouldn't be back for hours. Suddenly, from the living room right below me, there was a loud, distinct thwack. It sounded exactly like a heavy book falling flat on the floor. My heart jumped into my throat. I muted my music and just listened. Silence. But it wasn't a comfortable silence anymore. It was a tense, listening silence. I slowly crept to my door, opening it a crack. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding tiny. "Mom? Dad?" Nothing. I tiptoed downstairs, my eyes scanning the dark rooms. I flicked on the living room light. There, in the middle of the floor, was a thick copy of Moby Dick from my dad's collection, splayed open. The bookshelf was a good 10 feet away. I stared at the book, then at the shelf. Could it have just fallen? It seemed impossible. It was wedged tightly between two other big books. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a truck passing by had shaken it loose just right. It was a flimsy excuse, and deep down I knew it, but it was an explanation. I put the book back, pushed it in firmly, and went back upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me for the first time in my life. The incidents kept happening like this for months. Always small. Always deniable. A kitchen cabinet door left open when I was sure I'd closed it. The faint scrape of a chair in the dining room when no one was there. A single, quiet thump from the attic. Each time, I'd feel that spike of cold fear, that gut instinct telling me I wasn't alone. And each time, I would desperately find a way to explain it away. The latch was loose. The house was settling. It was a mouse. I got good at rationalizing the irrational. But underneath all that logic, the fear was growing. I started to dread being alone in the house. The quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watchful. It felt like the held breath right before a scream. I never told my parents. How could I? They'd just say I was being dramatic. And part of me wanted to believe they were right. But another, deeper part of me knew something was wrong. Something was in the house with me, and it was playing a slow, patient game, trying to make me question my own sanity before it really showed itself. The line between strange and terrifying is thin, and that winter, whatever was in my house decided to stomp right over it. The small, dismissible things gave way to events that were harder to ignore, things that felt more personal, more direct. The feeling of being watched grew from a vague unease into something I could practically feel breathing down my neck in the shadows of my own home. It started with the cold. There was this one spot at the bottom of the main staircase, no bigger than a doormat, that became incredibly cold. At first, I blamed it on a draft from the old front door. I even got my dad to put new weather stripping on it. It didn't help. You could walk through the house on a warm day, but when you passed that one spot, a sudden, bone-deep chill would wrap around your ankles. It felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer for just a second. Our cat, Milo, refused to go near it. He'd walk all the way around the living room to avoid that one patch of floor. There was no source, no vent, no draft. It was just a pocket of impossible cold, right there in our hallway. A quiet little sign that the rules didn't apply in our house anymore. Then, the electronics started acting up. We had an old TV in the basement that we mostly used for video games. One Saturday, I was alone, cleaning my room upstairs. The house was quiet. Then, faintly, from 2 floors below, I heard it, the harsh hiss of white noise. I turned my music down. It was unmistakable. The basement TV was on. Annoyed, I trudged down 2 flights of stairs. The room was dark, lit only by the frantic, dancing static on the screen. I grabbed the remote and hit the power button. The screen went black, and the room was plunged into a heavy silence. I didn't think much of it until it happened again the next weekend. This time, I knew for a fact the TV had been off. Again, the roar of static filled the house. Again, I went down to find the screen alive. This time, real fear cut through my annoyance. I turned it off, and then I unplugged it from the wall. I physically pulled the plug from the socket. I went back upstairs, my heart hammering. The message was crystal clear. This thing, whatever it was, could do more than move my keys. It could use our electricity. It could make itself heard. The whispers began a few weeks later. It was late, and I was doing homework at my desk. The house was asleep. In the total silence, I heard it. It was so faint I almost missed it, a breathy sound that seemed to come from right behind me. A soft, drawn-out, shh, like someone trying to get my attention. I ripped my headphones off and spun around in my chair. The room was empty. The door was closed. I strained my ears, holding my breath. Nothing. I tried to tell myself it was just my brain playing tricks on me, making patterns out of nothing. But it had felt so close. Like it was right at my ear. It happened 2 more times over the next month, always when I was alone, always in a moment of absolute quiet. A breath without a body. It was an intimate, terrifying violation. The shadows were the worst part, though. They started in the corner of my eye. A tall, dark shape darting past a doorway. A flicker of blackness at the top of the stairs. Every time I'd snap my head to look, nothing was there. My brain screamed, it's just a trick of the light. But it happened too often, and the shape was always the same, tall, thin, and featureless, like a column of pure shadow. One evening, I was in the kitchen washing dishes. My parents were watching a movie in the living room. Through the doorway, I could see the hall. For just a second, I saw it. It wasn't in my periphery this time. It was standing there, clear as day. A silhouette of a man, impossibly tall and thin, wearing what looked like a wide-brimmed hat. It had no face, just a solid, black void in the shape of a person. It stood perfectly still, and a kind of fear I'd never felt before gripped me. It wasn't just being scared, it bypassed my brain and went straight for the soul. I felt like a prey animal that had just locked eyes with its predator. I couldn't breathe. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it dissolved back into the normal shadows. I gasped, stumbling back. "Did you see that?" I choked out. My dad called back, "See what, honey?" I couldn't answer. I knew they hadn't seen it. It wasn't for them. I couldn't deny it anymore. This wasn't a game of misplaced keys. This was targeted. It was no longer just a presence, it had a shape. And it was getting bolder. The house was no longer my home when I was alone. It was its territory. The night it all came to a head was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. A thick, wet snow was falling, muffling the world in a white blanket. The silence outside made every tiny sound inside the house feel huge. My parents were at a dinner with old friends and wouldn't be back until late. I was 17, but the thought of the empty hours ahead filled me with a familiar, clenching anxiety. The house felt bigger and more watchful than ever. For the first couple of hours, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I hid in my bedroom with a loud action movie turned up, drowning out any other sounds. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom, a selfie of her and my dad, smiling at a restaurant. The message read, "Having a great time. The snow is really coming down. We'll be home as soon as we can, sweetie. Love you." A wave of relief washed over me. Seeing their faces, knowing they were an hour away, grounded me. I texted back, "Love you too. Drive safe." The night was halfway over. I could do this. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the front door opening downstairs. The click of the latch, the creak of the wood, and the soft whoosh as it closed, followed by the thud of the deadbolt. My first thought was pure relief. They were home early. The snow must have gotten worse. I paused my movie, a huge smile on my face. I wasn't alone anymore. Then, I heard the jingle of keys, followed by the clatter as they were dropped into the ceramic bowl. The exact sound my father made every single day. A heavy sigh echoed up the stairs. All the fear I'd been feeling just evaporated. "Dad?" I called out, my voice bright. "You guys are home really early." There was no answer. I frowned. Maybe he hadn't heard me. I heard his footsteps. Heavy, solid steps. The sound of his work boots. They moved from the hall into the living room, which was directly beneath me. I listened as they paced for a moment, a short, familiar path from the doorway to the fireplace and back. I relaxed again. He was probably just stretching his legs after the long drive. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was different. It was heavy. Expectant. Every other sound in the world seemed to have vanished. All my senses were focused on the floor beneath me, just waiting. After a long minute, the footsteps started again. But this time, they were heading for the stairs. Thump. The sound of a heavy boot on the first wooden step. My body went rigid. Something was wrong. The pace, the weight, it was all correct, but something was profoundly wrong. My phone, with my mom's text, was still on the nightstand. They were miles away. My mind was scrambling. Did they come home separately? No, they had one car. Drag? The second sound. The sound of his left foot, softer, pulling slightly. The sound of his old knee injury. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a random intruder. A burglar wouldn't know about the limp. A stranger wouldn't know the exact weight of his tread, the specific cadence I had heard a million times. This was a performance. A deliberate, perfect, horrifying mimicry. Thump. Drag. The sound was moving up the staircase. But it was slow. Agonizingly, unnaturally slow. My father took the stairs two at a time, but this was a funeral march. Each step was placed with care, each creak of the old wood drawn out. It was taking its time. It wanted me to listen. My breath caught in my throat. I scrambled backward on my bed, pressing myself against the wall, pulling my blanket up to my chin. My eyes were locked on my bedroom door. What was I supposed to do? Call 911? What would I say? There's someone in my house who sounds exactly like my dad, but it's not him? They'd think I was crazy. I was trapped. Frozen. Thump. Drag. It was halfway up. The sounds were so clear, so precise, I could picture his boots on each step. But it wasn't him. The thing on the stairs was wearing my father's sounds like a costume. Thump. Drag. It reached the top of the stairs. The footsteps stopped. It was on the landing, right outside my bedroom door. The floorboards out there groaned under a heavy, stationary weight. It was right there. Absolute silence. A silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure. I stared at the door, at the thin sliver of light from the hall lamp underneath. A shadow fell across that sliver of light, blotting it out for a heart-stopping second. And then, the doorknob began to turn. It moved with excruciating slowness. I could hear the inner mechanics of the old brass knob, a series of soft clicks. The latch was slowly, deliberately, being retracted. And my mind screamed. I didn't lock the door. The one night I forgot to flip the little lock was tonight. I was backed into the corner of my bed, a pathetic, whimpering mess, unable to scream, unable to move, watching that knob turn until it could turn no more. The door didn't open. The knob remained fully turned for an eternity. Then, just as slowly, it began to turn back. Click! The latch slid back into place. It was toying with me. It could have come in. It chose not to. It chose this instead, this demonstration of absolute power. The torment was the point. Then came a new sound. A sound that will be etched into my memory until the day I die. A soft, dry scratching on the wood of the door. Slow and methodical. It sounded like a single, long fingernail, tracing idle patterns on the other side. Scrape. 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 It was right there, just inches away, separated only by a thin panel of wood. It was a message, sent right through the door. I'm here. I know you're in there. And I can get to you anytime I want. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, listening to that soft, intermittent scratching. Time had lost all meaning. My entire world was the sound of that fingernail on the door and the silent, heavy thing that accompanied it. Then, a new sound cut through the night, a real sound. The low rumble of a car engine, the crunch of tires on snow. Headlights swept across my window. My parents were home. The instant the car door slammed shut outside, the scratching stopped. Vanished. The presence at the door was gone. The heavy atmosphere in the hall evaporated. The air in my room was suddenly breathable again. The normal house sounds filtered back in. The spell was broken. A moment later, I heard the real sound of my father entering the house. His keys jingled quicker, his footsteps were faster. He stomped the snow off his boots and called up, "We're home." His actual voice shattered my paralysis. A sob ripped out of my throat, and I scrambled off the bed, threw the door open, and practically fell down the stairs into his arms, babbling about footsteps and the doorknob and the scratching. They tried to calm me down, their faces filled with concern. My dad, ever the pragmatist, checked every door and window. Everything was locked from the inside. He checked the basement and the attic. There was no one. No sign of a break-in. No sign that anyone but me had been in the house at all. They chalked it up to an overactive imagination, the storm, being alone, the old house making noises. They said I'd probably had a waking dream. I wanted so badly to believe them. But I knew the difference between a dream and the cold, hard reality of that turning doorknob. I knew the feel of that presence. I have the memory of that scratching noise burned into my brain. I never slept in that room again without a chair wedged under the doorknob. I avoided being home alone at all costs. The house was no longer my sanctuary. It was a place where the walls themselves could lie. The thing at our house had shown me what it could do, and then it had gone quiet again, happy to let the memory of that night do its work. We never spoke of it again, but my sense of safety in my own home was shattered forever. I moved out for college the following year and never spent another night there alone. Sometimes I wonder if it's still there, in that buttery yellow house, waiting in the quiet. Waiting for the next person who finds themselves alone in the silence. Some things, I've learned, don't want to hurt you. They just want you to know they're there. They want to peel back the curtain of reality for just a moment and show you what's standing on the other side. And more than anything, they want you to know that you are never, ever, truly alone. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.